Resident Evil is one of those franchises that I never really thought I would fancy because I never really leaned into the horror category of games at all because they scared the hell out of me. But there's no denying it's considered the most iconic horror game series of all time, and for me that's because of its accessibility. The latest entry, Resident Evil Requiem, was my second game played in the entire series, and I had a lot of fun playing it. Having completed 3 playthroughs, all back to back on 3 different difficulties, the last one being on Insanity, it's fair to say I know what I'm talking about regarding the game. So today would just be a simple review of the good, the bad and the ugly of Resident Evil Requiem. So firstly, let's start with what Resident Evil Requiem absolutely nails. The visuals. This is easily one of the most visually stunning entries in the entire franchise. From the eerie corridors of the Rhodes Hill Care Center, which is by the way my favorite location of the game, like be it the kitchen, the dining hall, the basement or the courtyard, anything that fancies you, it was perfect. The lights flickering on and off, the tight corridors, the hub area, and the loads and loads of blood scattered everywhere on the floor. Okay, even the haunting ruins of Raccoon City were good to some extent. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is every environment felt meticulously crafted. Lighting, atmosphere, and environmental detail all combined to create a world that felt oppressive, decayed, and hauntingly beautiful. There's no question that graphics-wise, Requiem does a solid job. Then there's the gameplay design. Requiem attempts something that many Resident Evil games struggle with, blending survival horror with action. On one side, we have the slow, tense exploration and vulnerability of Grace's sections. On the other, the more confident and combat-focused gameplay of Leon, where he just bulldozes hordes and hordes of zombies. Surprisingly, the balance worked far better than I expected. Grace's segments emphasize fear and survival because there's limited resources available, such as if you take handgun ammo for example. Unless you are playing on casual difficulty or have infinite ammo, it means that you won't be able to kill your way out of everything. Basically what I'm trying to say is that you can't kill each and every zombie you encounter. You have to preserve resources for encounters in which you absolutely need ammo to get out of them. And even crafting stuff from the blood collector, which by the way is a very interesting concept. Like I really love the concept that you can use infected blood to craft a variety of items. But because there's a variety of items and there's very limited blood you can get, like you can get a lot of blood, but if you can't kill a lot of enemies, that means there's also a limit to the amount of blood you can get. And there's a lot of variety, like you can craft the injector that insta-kills enemies, and then there's the steroids and stabilizers. So basically there's a lot of variety and you can only use it to craft certain items that you think you might need. And then there's Leon sections, where it embraces the series' most action-driven roots, without completely abandoning tension. Like at higher difficulties, there were some sections in which I felt like my reflexes and aim had to be precise, otherwise I would be killed in the blink of an eye. However, once I got the grasp of the mechanics, bulldozing my way through hordes and hordes of zombies and just stomping the hell out of the bosses that I encountered, and especially the parrying mechanic of Resident Evil Requiem, I love it, okay? For me, the hatchet was much better than the knife. The hatchet is cool, like it looks cooler, the sound is cooler, the animations are cooler, the killing animations, like especially when you like rip apart enemies' heads or you're fighting bosses, you can even parry bosses' attacks using the hatchet. Like that's so cool, man, that's so cool. Okay, character design is another highlight. Like Grace alone, in my opinion, is exceptional in this aspect because look at her expressions. Okay, they feel so raw, so intense, so painful. The voice acting is perfect. The voice actor does a phenomenal job. Okay, this is one of the better voice acting examples that I've seen in the past decade. Like seriously, it's that good. And the way you're seeing the gameplay, especially if you play in first person, I personally did not because first person scares the crap out of me and this was my first legit horror game. But if you play through first person, like it really feels like you're playing through the eyes of Grace. And especially if you play in third person, she stumbles constantly because she's very scared and terrified and very inexperienced in dealing with these horrors. And also the constant sound of her breathing very heavily because she's afraid of what lies ahead. All that adds to the character design. And then there's Leon. Leon's design is better than ever. Not particularly because of the fact that he's much more handsome, like that helps, but in my opinion, when you look at his face and eyes, he looks so much more focused, and also you feel that this guy is really fighting for his life. He's infected. and he's old, and there's limited time left for him in this world, so he really has to see this mission through. I can see that through Leon's expressions, and even the emotional sensitivity, the trauma the man carries is displayed in certain scenes. Like, for example, you see the scene where he collapses and then wakes up and tells Grace about Raccoon City, and that he wants to make a difference this time. You can see the raw pain he has in his eyes, in his expression. Even the villains and the enemy design is great. Every enemy felt distinct and memorable, especially in the Roseville Care Center. From the gigantic chef to the singers whose melodies were genuinely terrifying when I was roaming the hallways. And even the bosses and side characters look so great. I mean, just look at Zeno. Okay, I know he's meant to be a clone of Wesker and a mere imitation, but the man has serious drip. The white suit, the black coat hanging on his shoulders, the sunglasses, the slick back hair, and especially the white hair. Like, I love white hair, okay? I love white hair characters, so, that's a plus point for me. And then there's the sound design, which deserves praise as well. Resident Evil has always used sound to build dread, and Requiem continues that tradition beautifully, especially during the section when the girl follows you throughout the basement. It's a very long section, and when you see the chains, when you hear the chains rattling and the footsteps and cries getting louder and louder as she chases you throughout the section, it's intense, and the sound adds to that. And then there's the Arc Center, where, with the liquors, as you throw empty bottles, or let's say you fired a gun at an infected, the liquors gun towards you. You can literally hear their footsteps getting louder and louder, and you're just panicking there, and you don't know what to do, and then you're readying your bottle of acid to throw at them. It's just great. Finally, there's the spectacle. Leon's sections are just so full of spectacle, and I'll only highlight the best one to me, which is obviously the bike sequence with Victor Gideon. I mean, that alone was just enough to blow our minds off. But, however, Resident Evil Requiem is not a perfect game, as with the good, there's also a lot of bad as well. So let's tackle the bad. The first issue with Resident Evil Requiem that I felt was that it was a game of two halves. The first half of the story, particularly Grace's journey, is tense, mysterious, and emotionally engaging. Okay, I had a lot of questions when I was playing as Grace and Leon in the first half of the game as to what the lore of this game is. Like, what was Grace made of? Was she even human? Why did Victor kidnap her? Who is Victor Gideon? Why is he so terrifying? Also, the fact that Grace and Leon were captured and kidnapped at the very starting segments of the game really added to the intensity. Okay? However, the moment that you encounter Zeno and the game turns towards the larger conspiracy involving him and the connections and the Elpis wires, the story begins to lose its focus for me. The pacing becomes rushed, major revelations come and go without proper development, and the emotional weight of earlier events starts to fade. Like, we're just told throughout the game that Grace is the key to everything without getting any context at all, like no lore or anything, and even the lore we do get, we have to scour it by ourselves by collecting files that are scattered throughout the game, and let's be honest, not all of the gamers out there will get all the pieces and files. A large part of this game's problem also comes from the fact that it relies heavily on nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is not inherently bad. In fact, Resident Evil has often used it effectively, but in Requiem, it sometimes felt like nostalgia replaced storytelling rather than enhancing it. Take the return for Raccoon City for example. On paper, this is one of the most exciting ideas the game has. Returning to the site of the franchise's greatest tragedy should have been a deeply emotional moment, especially for Leon. But the execution was far from good, gameplay wise at the very least. Like, every single time you have to backtrack to this main hub area of the BSAA camp while just running circles around everything, and plus there's very little enemy variety in the section for it to be interesting to me. Plus if you're playing for Platinum, be prepared for a lot of backtracking, like a lot of it. So yeah, initially it felt nice, but then it really started to irritate me and I just wanted it to be done with. Then there's the RPD section, where I really wanted something to happen. Like, this is the Raccoon City Police Department building we're talking about. The place where the entire Resident Evil 2 took place. And instead we're given a section where we just have to find files and we're just searching for items, and the entire section is replaced with an orphanage section playing as Emily, which by the way is a very intense section but a very, very short section as well. Like, if you play it in your second and third playthroughs, you'll blitz through it. Okay, you'll blitz through it, you'll gun through it, you'll not even know when it's over. Honestly. And the entire RPD element of the game is carried only by that one cutscene of Leon entering it. That's it. Okay, nothing else. And then there's the appearance of Mr. X, who legit only had 10 minutes of screen time, including his boss fight, by the way. For a character that is so iconic, and the fact that he comes back in the RPD section itself, you cannot have such a minor screen time for him and expect that his presence alone would just be quality enough. Same thing happened to Hunk, who just had a few lines. He meets Leon, locks eyes with him, he has tons of moments where he could literally kill Leon then and there, but again, plot armor. But anyways, he dies shortly after in like 2 to 3 minutes. You're the Grim Reaper, and you're losing so easily to an infected 50-year-old Leon who's fighting for his life and coughing badly like Arthur Morgan. I get it, Leon is a certified badass, but this is Hunk we're talking about, okay? He deserved a much better ending than that, or at least a better death. What I'm trying to say is that why introduce these characters only in this entry just to have them executed without any proper moments given for them to shine? But the biggest weakness of the game lies in its villains. Victor Gideon began as a fascinating antagonist. In the early hours of the game, he felt dangerous, unpredictable, and genuinely threatening. He kidnapped both the protagonists, orchestrated large-scale chaos, and even got his own cinematic action sequences. Like, did you look at him? In the highway chasing sequence, he was a badass with a rocket launcher in his hand. Yet despite all that presence and spectacle, Gideon ultimately lacked depth. We never truly understood who he is, what shaped him, or why he believed in his actions. All we got were bleak statements. Compared to memorable villains like Mother Miranda, Osmond Saddler, and Albert Wesker, Gideon simply lacked the larger-than-life identity that defined great Resident Evil antagonists. And then there's Zeno, the biggest problem of Resident Evil Requiem. When Zeno was first introduced, he looked like someone who could have a lot of potential as a villain. Honestly, he had the potential to be one of the most interesting villains in the entire franchise. The white hair, the confident presence, the almost Wesker-like aura, everything about him suggested a major threat. And even though he was implied to be an imitation of Wesker, the fact that he could break out of it and present himself as a completely different character had a lot of potential in it, but that potential was never fully realized. Zeno received very little background and is shown to be a character who is way less shrewd than the prior Resident Evils that we encountered before him. I mean, all he does is show up and he's yapping constantly about Grace being some sort of key, and he encourages her to embrace her destiny, the very same thing Gideon constantly mutters throughout the game. And then when we finally get to see him in action, all he does is dodge and just flex his powers for 1 to 2 minutes, and then he loses his powers and dies in a very laughable manner, being decapitated by someone he looked down upon. For a character who visually and thematically echoes Albert Wesker, the greatest villain in the Resident Evil franchise, this felt like a massively missed opportunity. I mean, he did not even get a boss fight. A final confrontation between Leon and Zeno could have been one of the most iconic moments in the series. I mean, Capcom should have literally given us a final boss battle with Zeno instead of Gideon. Honestly, I get what they were going for. They were going for a twist, with Victor Gideon shown to be alive, surprisingly, and he comes and he decapitates Albert Wesker's clone. He's shown to be powerful and threatening, and then he dies. I get that, but honestly, if you have a character with that design, with those looks, and with these powers, I would honestly have been much more interested and invested in the game if Zeno was the final boss battle. Instead, the character disappears almost as quickly as he arrives. Then there's the ugly. Finally, we reach the ugly. These aren't necessarily game-breaking issues, but they do chip away at the experience in my personal opinion. Like, these are just quips of mine, okay? Like, I'm just whining about stuff right now. So, the first problem was the switching between characters. Like, I felt that in some segments of the game, especially the beginning, we did not get enough time for the characters to shine as much as I personally wanted them to. Leon's opening sequence, for example, is incredibly exciting, but it lasts only a few minutes before the game quickly shifts away. Same thing happens when he enters the hospital. There's just so little playtime with Leon in the Roseville Care Center. Now, similarly, Grace's role becomes noticeably reduced in the second half of the game when we reach the Arc Center. After carrying much of the emotional weight early on, her sections in the later parts of the games feel surprisingly brief. And despite her importance to the narrative, Grace never truly receives a major boss fight of her own. You fight almost all of the bosses as Leon. Leon is the badass, he should be the one fighting all the big guys, but Grace should have at least got one boss fight. She is also a central protagonist. I mean, even Leon in Resident Evil 2 and Ethan in Resident Evil 7 got to fight major bosses at least once, all by themselves, being very inexperienced, so why not Grace? This is a strange omission, especially considering how central she is to the story's themes. Even small gameplay ideas felt slightly underdeveloped, the biggest of which in my opinion was the car that Leon had. There was so much potential in it for dynamic exploration. Like, we reached Raccoon City, now Leon has a car, let's just use the car to travel to different areas of the city. But instead, Capcom gave us a scene where it was like, the area of Raccoon City is not traversable by cars, so we'll carry on by foot. And we are just running circles around Raccoon City like idiots, collecting each and every collectible. It's just so boring. Like, we could have gotten a section like the boat section in Resident Evil 4, but Capcom gave us something else. Like, it's just a minor complaint, but it's just a complaint nonetheless. Moments like these made the game feel as though certain ideas were either rushed or left incomplete. But anyways, despite its flaws, Resident Evil Requiem remains an ambitious and fascinating entry in the franchise. At its best, it delivers incredible atmosphere, strong gameplay variety, and moments of genuine emotional weight. But at its worst, it struggles with rushed storytelling, underdeveloped villains, and an over-reliance on nostalgia. In many ways, Requiem felt like a game filled with incredible ideas that weren't executed or weren't given enough time to breathe. And yet, even with those imperfections, it still captured the essential stuff that makes Resident Evil so iconic. I would understand some people calling it a masterpiece, but I would also definitely understand the perspective of those that care to differ. It's a great game, it's a good game, and if you're a Resident Evil fan, it's definitely worth your bucks. Honestly, if you haven't played it yet, I would encourage you to do so. This is the Devil Crow. Please like and subscribe, it'll really help the channel grow, and much more Resident Evil 9 content coming out. Take care, see you guys later, bye bye.